Chosen one, this is why God kept you single all this time, women of God. My dear sisters, there comes a moment in every woman's life when she pauses and wonders, why am I still single? The world, with its noise and expectations, often makes us feel that being single is a sign of incompleteness. But what if I told you that your singleness is not an accident? What if it's not a punishment, but a divine preparation? What if being single is not the absence of love, but the presence of God's hand shaping you for something greater? Sometimes being single feels lonely. Sometimes it feels like rejection. Sometimes it feels like waiting for a bus that never arrives. But in the kingdom of God, singleness is never wasted. It is a sacred season, a refining fire, a divine pause. It's the time when God builds in you the strength, courage, and faith that will anchor you for the rest of your journey. You see, the chosen ones are rarely rushed. God doesn't hand them quick solutions or temporary fixes. He shapes them slowly, carefully, tenderly. And for women of God, singleness is often the classroom where some of life's most powerful lessons are taught. So if you feel overlooked, you're not overlooked. You're being set apart. If you feel delayed, you're not delayed. You're being prepared. If you feel empty, you're not empty. You're being filled with something deeper than fleeting affection, the unshakable love of God. Your story is not behind schedule. Your life is not missing pieces. You are being kept in this moment for reasons that heaven understands, even if the world does not. And one day, when God's timing reveals itself, you'll see that every tear, every prayer, and every season of waiting was not just necessary, it was holy. Chosen one, do not despise your singleness. Do not rush to trade it away for approval. Do not shrink in shame because others do not understand it. Stand firm, be grounded. Because when you finally see why God kept you single, you'll realize He was never withholding from you. He was protecting you, positioning you, and preparing you for something far greater than you could ever imagine. Vulnerability is not weakness, it is courage. This truth is often misunderstood in our world because we have been conditioned to see vulnerability as something fragile, as something that exposes us to danger, rejection, or failure. But when we look deeper, we realize that vulnerability is the very soil in which trust, faith, and deep relationships are planted. For women of God who have walked through long seasons of singleness, vulnerability becomes not only a test, but also a teacher. It invites you to lay down your walls, your fears, and your need for control, and instead step into a space where you can be fully seen by God and eventually by others. It is easy to build walls after heartbreak, disappointment, or the silent ache of unanswered prayers. These walls feel safe because they protect us from being hurt again. But they also isolate us from connection and rob us of the fullness of life God intends. Vulnerability is the courage to lower those walls and to risk being seen, not in a reckless way, but in a way that honors both your humanity and your faith. When you are single, vulnerability shows up in the quiet moments of honesty. It shows up when you whisper to God that you feel lonely, even though you are surrounded by people. It shows up when you admit that you long for companionship, even while trying to convince yourself that you are fine on your own. It shows up when you attend a wedding and smile for your friend, but feel the sharp sting of longing in your chest. To be vulnerable in those moments is to stop pretending that you are unaffected, to stop performing strength you do not feel, and to instead acknowledge the reality of your emotions before God, and perhaps even before trusted people in your life. Vulnerability is not pretending you have it all together. It is the bold act of showing up with your imperfections, your questions, and your tender heart. Why does this matter? Because vulnerability is the birthplace of courage. It is the act of saying, even though I don't have guarantees, I will still show up. Even though I fear rejection, I will still open myself to connection. Even though I don't know the outcome, I will trust God enough to be real. That act of showing up without certainty is bravery. To remain closed off, hiding behind a mask of strength, may feel safer in the moment, but it costs you the opportunity to grow. Vulnerability does not promise comfort, but it promises transformation. And transformation is exactly what God is after in seasons of singleness. Think of the biblical figures who walked with God in their seasons of waiting. Hannah, who prayed with tears for a child. Ruth, who chose faithfulness over fear and stepped into a future she could not predict. Mary, who accepted the angel's words without knowing the full cost. None of them lived behind walls of perfection. Each one opened themselves up vulnerably to God's calling, and that openness became the ground for God's miracles. In the same way, your vulnerability in singleness can become the place where God writes a story you never expected. But that requires courage. The courage to admit your need, to lean into faith, and to risk stepping forward when you cannot see the whole path. Vulnerability also reshapes how you view yourself. So often, single women are taught to present a polished version of themselves, to appear strong, independent and flawless, as if perfection will attract love. But vulnerability flips this on its head. It tells you that being real, authentic, and even imperfect is far more powerful than any mask of perfection you could wear. When you embrace vulnerability, you free yourself from the exhausting performance of pretending to be someone you are not. You allow yourself to be loved for who you truly are, not who you think you should be. That is not weakness. That is the deepest form of strength. There is also a sacred dimension to vulnerability with God. Prayer is itself a vulnerable act. To kneel, to lift your hands, to confess your fears, to ask boldly for what your heart longs for, this is courage in action. Vulnerability with God strips away the polite, rehearsed words and invites raw honesty. It is when you cry out, "Lord, I don't understand why I'm still here, why I'm still waiting, why my story hasn't unfolded the way I dreamed." God is not threatened by your vulnerability. In fact, He welcomes it. The Psalms are filled with vulnerable cries, laments, and unfiltered emotions, and they remind us that God desires real hearts, not rehearsed performances. Every tear you shed, every confession you make, every piece of your heart you reveal is an act of trust. That trust builds intimacy, and that intimacy is what sustains you in the waiting. Furthermore, vulnerability with others strengthens community. One of the lies of shame is that you are alone in your struggles. When you dare to speak honestly about your journey, you give others permission to do the same. You discover that others have felt the same loneliness, the same doubts, the same hopes deferred. That connection, born from vulnerability, creates a circle of support that can carry you through difficult seasons. It reminds you that you are not isolated, but part of a greater family of faith. Vulnerability builds bridges, and those bridges sustain you in ways independence never could. Of course, vulnerability carries risks. People may misunderstand you, judge you, or fail to respond with the compassion you need. But courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is moving forward in spite of it. Even if some people do not handle your vulnerability well, the act of being open is still holy because it honors your humanity. It keeps your heart soft instead of hardening it with bitterness or pride. And when you meet people who can hold your vulnerability with gentleness, those relationships become treasures that reflect the very heart of God. The truth is, singleness requires a unique kind of bravery. It requires showing up in life without a partner by your side, making decisions that others may not understand, and walking through seasons of longing without easy answers. That bravery is cultivated through vulnerability, through the daily choice to show up authentically, to risk connection, and to live with an open heart. It is tempting to numb your vulnerability with distractions, business, or shallow relationships, but those only delay your growth. True courage is found in leaning into your vulnerability, instead of avoiding it. So, chosen one, remember this. Vulnerability is not your enemy. It is your strength. It is not a sign that you are weak. It is a sign that you are alive, growing, and willing to step into the unknown with faith. God is not keeping you single to punish you. He is allowing this season so you can learn to live vulnerably, courageously, and wholeheartedly, without fear of judgment or rejection. When you master that, you will not only be prepared for a future relationship if it is part of God's plan, but you will also be equipped to live a life that radiates authenticity, connection, and grace. Vulnerability is courage, and courage is the mark of the chosen. Your worth is not negotiable. This is one of the most powerful truths you can carry with you through every season of life, especially in singleness. The world is constantly trying to attach value to conditions. What you look like, what job you have, what kind of relationship status you hold, how many likes you get on social media, or whether someone chooses you as their partner. But when you live from that perspective, your worth becomes something fragile, something conditional, something that can rise and fall with every compliment, rejection, or life change. That is not the truth of who you are. In God's eyes, your worth is eternal, immovable, and unshakable. It is not determined by whether someone wants to be with you. It is not based on whether you meet society's timelines or expectations. It was sealed by God Himself when He created you in His image, breathed life into your lungs, and called you His own. For women of God walking through seasons of singleness, this truth can sometimes feel distant. It is easy to start believing that because you are not chosen by a person, you are less valuable, less desirable, or less worthy of love. But the truth is, human rejection does not erase divine acceptance. Your worth was not assigned by people, so it cannot be removed by people. When God calls you His daughter, His chosen one, His beloved, that identity holds more weight than any relationship status ever could. What happens, though, is that we often forget this truth in the face of loneliness or comparison. When you scroll through pictures of engagements, weddings, and families, you may hear a voice whispering, "You're behind. You're not enough. Something must be wrong with you." That voice is not the voice of God. It is the voice of fear, shame, and scarcity. And if you let it speak louder than the truth, you will begin to bargain with your worth. You will begin to think that if you change yourself enough, if you lower your standards enough, or if you hide parts of yourself enough, you might finally be chosen. But when you compromise your worth for the sake of being chosen, you are forgetting that you were already chosen by the Creator of the universe. Worth that depends on external validation is fragile and fleeting. Worth that is rooted in God's truth is steady and enduring. This is why He sometimes keeps you single longer than you expected. It is not because He delights in your loneliness, but because He wants to anchor your worth so deeply in Him that no person, no season, and no circumstance could ever take it away. Relationships can bring joy, but they are not the foundation of your identity. If your sense of worth depends on being in a relationship, then when that relationship struggles, or worse, ends, your entire identity collapses with it. God wants more for you than that. He wants you to know that even without a ring, even without a partner, even without the applause of others, you are enough. Enough in His eyes. Enough for the calling He placed on your life. Enough because He said so, not because anyone else confirmed it. When you live as if your worth is negotiable, you end up living in scarcity. You begin to believe that love, opportunities, and blessings are limited, and you must hustle or compete to earn them. But when you live as if your worth is fixed and unshackable, you begin to operate from abundance. You realize that God's timing is not a punishment, but a preparation. You stop viewing yourself as someone waiting to be completed, and instead embrace the truth that you are already whole. This doesn't mean that desires for marriage, companionship, or family are wrong. It simply means they are not the measuring stick of your worth. Sometimes the pain of singleness is not just about wanting love, but about what singleness seems to say about you. Maybe you've been told that something must be wrong with you, that your standards are too high, or that you need to change yourself to finally be chosen. Those messages are rooted in fear, not truth. They teach you to treat your worth like a price tag that can be lowered to attract attention. But God never called you to discount yourself to fit into someone else's cart. He created you with a value that does not decrease because someone fails to see it. Diamonds remain diamonds whether or not someone recognizes their brilliance. Your value remains intact whether or not someone steps into your life. Understanding that your worth is not negotiable also changes how you navigate relationships when they do come. Instead of clinging desperately to someone just to avoid being alone, you can approach relationships from a place of strength, clarity, and peace. You no longer settle for less than what honors God because you are not trying to prove your value. You already know it. This frees you to choose relationships not out of fear of loneliness, but out of alignment with God's truth. It frees you to say no when something does not serve your growth, your peace, or your calling. It frees you to walk away from situations that ask you to diminish yourself just to be loved. Because you understand that real love does not demand the sacrifice of your worth, it celebrates it. This unshakable worth also fuels resilience. Rejection will come, whether in friendships, career opportunities, or potential relationships. But when your worth is secure, rejection no longer defines you. It may sting, but it does not shatter you. It may slow you down, but it does not stop you. It may disappoint you, but it does not diminish you. You can face closed doors with courage because you know that they do not signal your inadequacy. They simply redirect you towards something better aligned with God's plan. This resilience becomes a quiet strength, the kind that shines even in waiting. People may not understand it, but they will feel it. And that strength is one of the greatest gifts you can carry into every season of your life. Living with the knowledge that your worth is not negotiable also allows you to experience freedom. Freedom from comparison, freedom from timelines, freedom from the need to prove yourself. You no longer feel rushed to fit into the molds of others because you recognize that your journey is uniquely crafted by God. You no longer feel the pressure to perform perfection because you trust that being authentic is enough. And you no longer see your singleness as a curse, but as a season where you get to live fully, pursue your calling, and cultivate joy without needing external approval. This freedom transforms the way you walk into rooms, the way you dream, and the way you trust God, chosen one. If there is anything you take to heart, let it be this: nothing and no one can add to or subtract from the worth that God has placed on your life. Whether you are single or married, young or old, celebrated or overlooked, your worth remains constant. Do not hand over the keys to your identity to anyone else. Do not let culture, circumstances, or even your own doubts rewrite what God has already declared over you. You are loved, chosen, and valuable, not because of what you have or what you lack, but because of who created you. The sooner you embrace this, the freer you will be to live boldly, to love deeply, and to wait patiently for whatever God has in store. And when that season arrives, you will enter it not from a place of desperation, but from a place of wholeness, strength, and unshakable worth. Shame has no authority over your story. That truth is so easy to say, yet so difficult to believe, especially when you are walking through the quiet seasons of singleness. Shame has a way of creeping in during the nights when you feel most alone, in the social gatherings where everyone else seems paired off, and in the scrolling through images of people celebrating anniversaries, engagements, or families while you sit with a heart full of questions. Shame whispers lies that cut deeper than loneliness. It tells you that you are less than, that you are unwanted, that you are invisible. It disguises itself as truth by using your circumstances against you. But here is what you need to remember: shame is a liar, and it only survives in silence. The moment you bring it into the light, its power begins to dissolve, because shame cannot live in the presence of truth. Shame thrives on comparison, on secrecy, and on the stories you tell yourself when no one is watching. It tries to convince you that you are the only one struggling, that everyone else has figured out love and happiness except you. But the reality is that countless women of God have walked the very same road you are walking now. Many of them have felt the sting of rejection, the weariness of waiting, and the ache of unanswered prayers. The difference is that some allowed shame to chain them down, while others chose to bring their truth into the open, to stand in the light, and to declare that their worth and their story are not defined by what people see on the outside. Shame says, if you were better, you would already be married. Shame says, if you were lovable enough, someone would have chosen you by now. Shame says, you are failing at the one thing society expects of you. But God's truth says, you are my beloved, chosen before the foundation of the world. God's truth says, you are complete in me, lacking nothing. God's truth says, my timing is perfect, and my story for you is still being written. The battle, then, is not between singleness and marriage. It is between shame and truth. And every time you choose truth, shame loses its grip on your heart. For many women, shame becomes a silent companion because it is never spoken aloud. They cover it with business, with laughter, with perfect social media posts, but underneath, shame gnaws at their confidence and steals their peace. The danger of shame is not just what it makes you feel in the moment. It's what it convinces you to believe long term. It convinces you to settle for relationships that do not honor you because you feel you do not deserve more. It convinces you to silence your dreams because you fear being seen as foolish. It convinces you to build walls around your heart so high that even love cannot climb over them. That is why shame must be named and dismantled. The act of saying, yes, I feel lonely. Yes, I feel overlooked. Yes, I feel tired of waiting is not weakness. It is the beginning of healing. It takes away shame's secrecy and replaces it with honesty. One of the greatest weapons against shame is vulnerability, because vulnerability invites connection. When you dare to share your story with someone safe, you find out you are not alone. Others have felt what you are feeling. Others have cried the same tears. And suddenly, the lie of isolation breaks apart. Shame loses its strength because you no longer carry it in silence. This is why community matters so deeply. When you are surrounded by women who will remind you of your worth, who will speak truth when shame tries to speak louder, you begin to rise above the lies that once held you down. The presence of safe people in your life becomes evidence that you are seen, valued, and not forgotten. There is also something profoundly spiritual about rejecting shame. When Jesus walked this earth, he constantly lifted shame off people. He spoke to the woman at the well, who had been defined by her past and her broken relationships, and he gave her dignity and a new story. He defended the woman caught in adultery, not by excusing her actions, but by refusing to let shame define her future. He restored Peter after his denial, showing that even failure does not end the story for those who turn back to God. Again and again, Jesus confronted shame and replaced it with grace. That same grace is available to you now. Singleness does not place you outside of God's love. If anything, it is an invitation to walk even more closely with Him, to let Him speak truth where shame once spoke lies. Another way shame tries to control your story is by attaching worth to timelines. It whispers that you are too old, too late, too behind. But God's story is not bound to human calendars. He does not measure your value by whether your life aligns with cultural milestones. Every person's path is different, and yours is uniquely designed for you. Shame wants you to believe you missed your chance, but God wants you to know that nothing can stop His plan for your life. Not your age, not your past, not your current season. The very thing shame tries to use against you may be the very thing God uses to bring Him glory. Living free from shame does not mean you will never feel it again. It means you recognize it for what it is and refuse to let it take the driver's seat of your life. You may still hear the whispers, but you will also know how to answer them. When shame says, "You're not enough," you will declare, "I am enough because God calls me His." When shame says, "You're unwanted," you will say, "I am already chosen." When shame says, "You should be ashamed of where you are," you will stand tall and say, "This season is not my punishment, it is my preparation." That is what it means to live in freedom, not the absence of lies, but the power to silence them with truth. And here is the most beautiful part. Your story, even with its struggles, can become a source of healing for others. When you choose to reject shame and speak openly about your journey, you create a safe space for someone else to confront their own shame. Your honesty becomes light in someone else's darkness. Your courage to live without shame becomes an invitation for them to do the same. In this way, your singleness, far from being a burden, becomes a testimony. It becomes proof that joy, peace, and worth can exist outside of relationship status. It becomes an encouragement to every other woman who feels hidden or forgotten. Shame has no authority over your story because your story is authored by God, not by shame. God does not write with the ink of condemnation. He writes with the ink of grace, love, and redemption. Every chapter of your life, including the chapter of singleness, carries meaning and beauty when viewed through His eyes. Even if shame tries to scribble its lies in the margins, God's handwriting is stronger. He has declared you free, beloved, chosen, and whole. No whisper of shame can erase what He has spoken. So, chosen one, the next time shame knocks on the door of your heart, remember that you do not have to open it. You do not have to carry its weight, and you do not have to let it control your decisions. Stand in the truth of who you are. Speak openly when shame tempts you to stay silent. Surround yourself with people who remind you of God's truth. And above all, trust that your story is unfolding exactly as it should, in the timing and grace of the one who holds it all. Shame has no authority here. You are free, and your story is holy. Love is not about proving yourself. It's about being seen. This truth strikes at the heart of so much of the struggle that women of God face during singleness. In a culture that constantly tells us to earn approval, to work harder for attention, to polish ourselves until we shine enough to be chosen, love becomes distorted into a performance. We begin to think that if we can just be beautiful enough, accomplished enough, agreeable enough, then maybe someone will finally recognize us and decide we are worthy of their love. But that is not love. That is striving. That is self-negotiation. Real love, the kind God designed, is not about hustling for worthiness. It is about being fully seen for who you are and still being embraced. When you live in a season of singleness, it is easy to slip into the trap of thinking you must fix yourself in order to be loved. You tell yourself that if you lost weight, if you smiled more, if you acted less opinionated, if you achieved a certain milestone, then suddenly you would become attractive enough for someone to notice. But what this mindset really does is teach you to perform. You begin presenting a version of yourself that is not fully authentic, hoping that by hiding your flaws or disguising your quirks, you will increase your chances of being chosen. And even if someone does choose you based on that performance, the cost is heavy, because you are loved for the mask, not the real you. That is why this truth is so important. Real love does not require performance. Real love does not demand that you shrink or hide. Real love sees you, all of you, and still says, You are enough. Or God models this truth in the way he loves his children. He does not wait for us to clean ourselves up, to meet impossible standards, or to prove ourselves worthy before he embraces us. His love meets us in our weakness, in our imperfection, in our humanity. He sees everything, the flaws, the mistakes, the failures, and he still calls us beloved. That is what authentic love looks like. And when you root yourself in his love first, you begin to understand that any human relationship worth having must reflect that same truth. It cannot be built on you endlessly proving yourself. It must be built on mutual seeing and mutual acceptance. This realization transforms how you approach singleness. Instead of viewing it as a problem to solve or as evidence of inadequacy, you can see it as a time of learning to embrace your authentic self without apology. You do not have to earn love. You do not have to hustle for it. You only need to live truthfully, showing up as who you are, and trust that the right people, the ones meant to walk with you, will value the real you. This doesn't mean you stop growing or improving yourself, but it means growth comes from a place of self-love rather than self-rejection. You improve not to prove your worth, but because you already know you are worthy. For many women, the greatest challenge is silence, the silence of not being chosen yet. That silence can feel like a judgment, as if the absence of love is proof that something is wrong with you. But here is the danger. If you believe that silence is evidence of your inadequacy, you will fall into the trap of striving. You will bend yourself out of shape to fill the silence. You will compromise your boundaries, ignore red flags, or diminish your voice just to be noticed. But love that demands compromise of your true self is not love. It is control. The silence is not a verdict on your worth. It is simply God's way of creating space for you to learn that your value does not come from being chosen by a human being, but from being known by him. Think of how exhausting it is to constantly feel like you must audition for someone's affection. That kind of striving is like running on a treadmill that never stops. You put in endless energy, but you never truly arrive. In contrast, real love feels like coming home. It does not drain you, it nourishes you. It does not ask you to prove your value. It reflects back to you the worth you already carry. To wait for that kind of love is worth every second of singleness, because the alternative is to settle for performance-based approval that leaves you empty. This truth also reshapes how you view rejection. Being passed over, being ghosted, being told, "You're not the one." Those experiences sting deeply, but they do not mean you failed. They simply mean that the person on the other side was not meant to see you fully. It is painful, yes, but it is not a reflection of your lack. It is evidence that God is protecting you from a love that would have required you to prove yourself endlessly, instead of being embraced freely. When you stop interpreting rejection as proof of inadequacy, you can begin to see it as redirection, God moving you away from performance-based relationships and toward authentic ones. Another powerful aspect of this truth is that it encourages you to bring your whole self into the world. Instead of hiding your gifts, your passions, or your calling because you fear they will intimidate others, you are free to live boldly. You do not have to dim your light to make others comfortable. You do not have to mute your voice to avoid rejection. The right love will celebrate your light, not compete with it. It will listen to your voice, not silence it. So rather than shrinking yourself, singleness becomes the time to expand yourself, to grow deeper into the fullness of who God created you to be. And when you live in that fullness, you stop attracting relationships based on performance and start aligning with relationships rooted in authenticity. At its core, this truth is about trust. Trusting that God sees you fully, trusts you with your own story, and will align you with people who can see you too. Love is not a transaction. It is not earned by performance or perfection. Love is an act of recognition, of truly seeing another human being and honoring them for who they are. To be seen is one of the deepest desires of the human heart, and the good news is that God already sees you completely. Nothing is hidden from Him, and still He delights in you. When you root yourself in that divine gaze, the need to prove yourself to others loses its grip. You are already loved. You are already chosen. You are already enough. Chosen one, your season of singleness is not a punishment. It is an invitation to unlearn the lie that you must prove yourself to be loved. It is a sacred space where you can rest in God's gaze, embrace your authenticity, and prepare your heart for relationships that reflect His kind of love. Do not settle for a love that makes you hustle for worthiness. Do not settle for a love that requires you to shrink, hide, or pretend. Wait for the love that sees you, the real you, and stays. Until then, live fully, boldly, and authentically, knowing that you are already seen by the one who matters most. That is the truth that dismantles striving. That is the truth that sets you free. And that is the truth that will guide you through singleness into whatever God has prepared for your future. Wholehearted living is holy living. This truth is both simple and profound, and for women of God walking through singleness, it is a reminder that life is not something you put on pause until marriage begins. Too often, society whispers that your real life will start when you are in a relationship, when you walk down the aisle, when you have a family. Until then, it tells you to wait quietly in the shadows, to treat your singleness as an in-between space, as if it were a holding room for the life you are actually meant to live. But this is a lie. The life you are living right now is not an accident, and it is not incomplete. It is a sacred, holy season, when you choose to live wholeheartedly in it, to embrace it with openness, gratitude, and courage. You honor God more deeply than if you were to live it half-heartedly while waiting for something else to arrive. Wholehearted living is about showing up fully, not halfway. It means choosing joy, pursuing dreams, cultivating relationships, and living with passion even while your heart carries desires that are not yet fulfilled. It means refusing to treat this chapter as a filler episode in your story. Instead, you see it as a vital chapter, one God is writing with intention. Singleness is not wasted time, it is sacred time. To live wholeheartedly is to decide that your worth and your joy are not on layaway until you have a partner. They are available here and now. And when you embrace that truth, you stop living in fear of missing out and start living in the fullness of what God has already placed in your hands. Living wholeheartedly does not mean you ignore your longings. It does not mean you deny the desire for companionship or pretend that waiting never aches. To live wholeheartedly is to acknowledge those desires honestly, to bring them before God, and still to choose to be fully alive today. It is about resisting the temptation to postpone joy. So many people live with a mindset that says, I'll be happy when. I'll be happy when I get married, when I have children, when I reach this milestone. But wholehearted living rejects that scarcity mindset and says, I will be happy now. I will find joy in the journey. I will embrace the blessings already around me, even while I pray for the ones to come. That choice, to embrace today instead of postponing life for tomorrow, is a holy act of trust. It declares that God's goodness is not waiting for some future moment. His goodness is present here and now. Wholehearted living is also about courage. It requires you to be present and authentic in a world that constantly tells you you're not enough until you fit a certain mold. It takes courage to stand in your singleness and say, I am still whole. I am still worthy. I am still living fully. Courage is needed because wholeheartedness demands that you show up even when life doesn't look the way you imagined. It asks you to lean into community even when you feel out of place. It asks you to pursue your calling even when you wonder who will walk beside you in it. But in that courage, you discover freedom. You no longer live half a life, waiting for someone else to validate it. You live the life God designed for you, trusting that His timing will align the rest. When you live wholeheartedly, you also begin to see the beauty of singleness as a gift, not a curse. It is a gift of time to deepen your relationship with God, time to discover your passions, time to build foundations that will sustain you in every season. It is a gift of freedom to move, to serve, to grow without the responsibilities that come with marriage and family. It is a gift of clarity to understand who you are and what you value before you ever join your life with someone else's. But you only see these gifts when you live with open eyes and an open heart. If you live resentfully, treating singleness as a prison, you will miss the treasures hidden in it. Wholehearted living turns your perspective from what you lack to what you have, and in doing so, it transforms singleness into something holy. Another key part of wholehearted living is authenticity. To live wholeheartedly is to live honestly, without hiding parts of yourself in order to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be. It means embracing your quirks, your strengths, your flaws, and your dreams. It means refusing to apologize for being fully you. This authenticity not only honors God, but also prepares you for real love in the future. Because real love cannot thrive when you are pretending. By practicing wholehearted authenticity now, you build the foundation for relationships that will embrace the real you later. In that sense, wholehearted living is holy preparation. It teaches you how to love and be loved truthfully. Wholehearted living is also about gratitude. It shifts your focus from what is missing to what is present. Gratitude turns waiting into worship. Instead of resenting the unanswered prayers, you begin to notice the blessings God has already poured out. The friendships, the opportunities, the lessons, the growth. Gratitude does not erase longing, but it balances it with perspective. It allows you to see that even in waiting, your life is rich with purpose. Gratitude is holy because it acknowledges the goodness of God in every season, not just in the ones that match your expectations. This way of living also changes how others see you. When people look at a woman who is single but not defeated, who is waiting but still thriving, who is desiring but not desperate, they see a testimony. They see evidence that God is enough, even in the absence of certain blessings. Your wholehearted living becomes a witness. It shows that faith is not just about waiting for what you want, but about living fully with what you already have. It shows that holiness is not about hiding your humanity, but about embracing it with grace. Your life becomes a living sermon, without you speaking a word, that tells others God's timing can be trusted. And perhaps the most profound truth of all is that wholehearted living aligns you with God's love in a deeper way. When you live half-heartedly, you keep parts of yourself closed off, waiting for someone else to open them. But when you live wholeheartedly, you open every part of your heart to God first. You let Him fill the places that feel empty. You let Him guide the dreams that feel unfinished. You let Him be enough in the spaces where you once thought you lacked. And in that openness, you discover that living fully present with God is the most holy life you can live. Marriage may come, love may arrive, but the truth remains that the foundation of a meaningful life is not a spouse. It is a wholehearted, holy relationship with the one who created you. Chosen one. This is why wholehearted living is holy living. Because it refuses to let you wait for tomorrow to begin living today. Because it shifts your focus from scarcity to abundance. Because it allows you to walk authentically, courageously, and gratefully in the season God has placed you in. And because it turns your singleness into something sacred, something purposeful, something that prepares you for the future without robbing you of the present. Do not hold back. Do not shrink. Do not put your life on pause. Live now, love now, worship now, be present now. This season is holy, and when you live it wholeheartedly, you will find that holiness is not only possible in singleness, it thrives there.